that they can eventually stop saving altogether for retirement. Now, this approach can be appealing for many who are interested in financial independence because it doesn't require that lifetime of frugality. There's no one right way to go about it. Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to Erin Talks Money. When I first started getting into finance, I was very young and my goal was simply to save enough money that I could do whatever I wanted. At this point, I was probably about 15 years old and I was watching my mom be tied to a job that she didn't particularly like, but she needed the paycheck to support her family. Now, I love my mom dearly, but I never wanted to be in that position. I wanted to be able to make my own choices in life. I didn't want a job and a paycheck to dictate it. So I saved and I saved and I saved and I started reading about money and I eventually went to school for it. It wasn't until sometime later that I learned about the concept of financial independence. I mean, financial independence is what I was after. I just didn't know it had a name. Since then, I have learned that there are an astounding number of different ways to reach financial independence that it's truly mind-boggling. Most of these types of financial independence fall under the FIRE acronym, Financial Independence Retire Early, but there is Lean FIRE, Fat FIRE, Slow FIRE, Coast FIRE, Barista FIRE, Flamingo FIRE, probably some others that I've obviously forgotten, but they exist, and who knew that there were so many different types? Now, each of these different types of financial independence have the ultimate same end goal. It's that you have enough money that you no longer are reliant on a job or a paycheck, that your money can sustain you. However, they all have different routes to get there, and that's where the distinctions come in. So I want to cover each of these, but because nobody wants to watch a 45-minute video, I'm going to make a little mini series, and in each one, I'm going to cover each different types of financial independence. That way each one can have its own dedicated video. Today, we're going to be talking about something called Coast FIRE, which I find incredibly interesting. But before we dive right into it, if you can take just one moment to hit that like button, as it really does help out new channels like this. Now, as I said, I want to start off with Coast FIRE as it is the most unique approach to saving money, in my opinion at least. Now, Coast FIRE is essentially where you save up enough money at a very young age that you're actually able to stop making any contributions to your savings and investments, but you still reach financial independence sometime down the road. Even though you have stopped contributing to your investments, the money continues to grow via compound interest. It's like you essentially reach this tipping point where you've built up enough of a nest egg that you can sort of have a hands-off approach, and you just allow time to work its magic on your money. Now, how it works is that you figure out how much of an annual income you would want to live off in retirement, and then you work backwards from there. So let's say that you want an income of $50,000 in retirement, for example. You would need a nest egg of $1.25 million in order to be financially independent. Now, how we got to that number is we take $50,000, multiply it by 25, because the rule is you should have 25 times your income in order to be independent. That will give you $1.25 million. We can also turn around and check our math using the rule of 4%. The rule of 4% says that you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio safely and not risk running out of money in retirement. So we take that $1,250,000 multiplied by 0.04 and we get $50,000. Now, if you're at all curious about the intricacies or an explanation on the 4% rule, I have a full dedicated video to it and I will link it down below in the description box. Next, you have to figure out how long you want to save for and what amount you need to save up in order to stop making contributions so that compound interest can take over and do the rest of the work. For instance, let's say you want to be absolutely done saving by the age of 30. You're going to save aggressively until 30, but then you totally want to be done. So if that's the case, assuming you want to retire at 60 years old with that $1.25 million so you can have that annual income of $50,000, how much would you need to save up? The answer is $125,000. Now, at that point, if you let compound interest take over, assuming an 8% return for the next 30 years, you would indeed grow your money to $1,250,000. Now that's pretty incredible. That means for the next 30 years, you don't have to save anything at all. Now, of course, saving up $125,000 by the time you're 30 is no small feat. But for many people, that early sacrifice could be totally worth it if it means you get to live a little larger later on in life, or that you no longer have to worry about saving for retirement. You've lifted a huge burden off your shoulders. But let's say instead of being done at 30 years old with your savings, say you want to save until you're 40, but you still want to reach 1.25 million at 60. How much of a difference is that going to make? Well, if you save until you're 40, you're going to have to save up $270,000. That's a significant sum, and it's significantly more than the amount you needed at 30 because we lost 10 extra years of compounding interest. So yes, you have 10 more years of savings, but they're going to have to be 10 years of aggressive savings. Now, if by some financial highlight you are able to save $270,000 by your 30th birthday, well, that just means you can reach your goals 10 years sooner. And by the time your 50th birthday rolls around, you would have that $1.25 million and you would be financially independent. And that's the thing you learn about financial independence, is that there's no one way to do it. Some people start their journey early in life, some people start it later in life. There's no one right way to go about it. And the numbers I'm using here are completely arbitrary. You don't have to stop saving at the age of 30 or 40 or retire at 60, and the income doesn't have to be $50,000. I'm just using them as an example. You should use the numbers that are meaningful to you. So Coast FIRE is a little different when compared to the more commonly known methods of FIRE. So most of the time we picture those in the FIRE community, financial independence, retire early, as wanting to save aggressively, live frugally, and leave the workforce incredibly early, sometimes ridiculously early, like in their 30s or 40s. However, those that are participating in the Coast FIRE approach, well, they're actually planning on a more normal retirement. They're looking at the age of 50 or 60 or 65. It's just that they save so aggressively in their early working years of their career, and they put away as much as they possibly can, that they can eventually stop saving altogether for retirement. At that point, they can spend their entire paycheck to live whatever kind of lifestyle they want, because saving for retirement is no longer a concern. Now, this approach can be appealing for many who are interested in financial independence because it doesn't require that lifetime of frugality. Imagine you're riding a bike, and at the start of your ride there is a huge hill. You're biking up it, your legs burn, you're out of breath, it's hard work. But you know if you can just get to the top of that hill, you can ride the other side down all the way to your final destination with very little effort. That's Coast FIRE. Coast FIRE takes advantage of having a significant amount, a lump sum saved up, and a long time horizon. After all, having a long time horizon in the stock market is what allows compound interest to do its magic. Time in the market matters. That is why Albert Einstein once said, "The strongest force in the universe is compound interest." Now, the benefits of Coast FIRE are pretty clear and easy to see. Once you have that lump sum saved up, you're essentially financially independent. After all, left to its own devices, that money will grow to the lump sum you need. You no longer have to put anything towards investments. Now, being that you're done saving, you could significantly increase your standard of living if you so choose. After all, you get to spend your entire paycheck if you want. You don't have to save any of it. That means you could start traveling, buying a nicer house or buying a nicer car, whatever you want. Or let's say you're not particularly happy at your job. You could leave that job and go to another one so long as the next one just covered your expenses. The choice is truly yours. But just as there are very obvious benefits to Coast FIRE, there are also some really big drawbacks or obstacles that you do have to consider. Number one, you're going to have to be making significantly more than you're spending. Otherwise, the whole thing is pretty much impossible. You have to be making enough that you can put away a large percentage and get that into investments and get that lump sum built up. If you're spending all your income, it's pretty impossible. Number two, you're going to have to be willing to drastically live below your means, and you're gonna have to somewhat enjoy it to make this process bearable. Let's say you make $70,000 a year. Well, you have to be willing to live on, say, half of that or even less. That's not always the easiest scenario when you're surrounded by people who are spending freely. It's gonna require a lot of sacrifice and a lot of compromise. If it makes you absolutely miserable to live the frugal lifestyle, that's probably not the best thing to do to yourself, because you don't want to spend 10 years in absolute misery. And number 3, you are going to need to have very little or no debt, or at the very least a very high income. Ideally, you would have both of those. You'd have no debt and a high income. It'd make the process much simpler. If you have a lot of debt, say student loans, a car loan, and consumer debt, it's going to be very hard to save a high percentage of your income, because so much of your income is going to go towards debt repayment, especially if you have just an average income. Now, it's not altogether impossible. Say you have a very high income, but when you have a high income, everything from the standpoint of saving and investing becomes much simpler. So if you have a high enough income that you can pay off all your debts and still save a significant portion, it's absolutely possible. But like I said, things get a little easier with a higher income anyhow. So you have to be able to put away that big percentage so you can save up that lump sum, so you can eventually allow that money to coast to retirement for you. Being that the average 30-year-old in America has a net worth of about $7,000, it's pretty clear to see that Coast FIRE is not a typical strategy. However, most people also don't belong to the FIRE community either. Now, saving up a large sum of money at a very early age is not easy, but it is not impossible either. It's easier to save and be frugal when you're younger than when you're older, like say when you're 20 as opposed to when you're 40. Because when you're 20, you could just continue living like a college kid. You could have a roommate, you could eat on the cheap, and you could continue to drive your clunker from high school. However, once you get to 40 and you have a family to support and a mortgage to pay, everything gets a little bit harder. But if you have that ability to save a very large chunk of your money at a very young age, Coast FIRE very well could be for you. Let me know what you guys think, what you think about Coast FIRE. As I said, I actually think it's one of the most unique approaches to financial independence out there. I love the freedom it gives you later in life after just a few years of frugality and sacrifice. So let me know your thoughts down below. That's gonna wrap it up for me today. Remember, I post new videos every Monday and Thursday. Be sure to hit that like button on the way out, ring that subscribe bell so you get notified every time I post a new video. Have a good one, guys. Bye.